Welcome, everybody, into a new episode of the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. I am Brian Ciano. Thank you so much for joining us as we take our weekly look at everything going on in the world of combat sports. And it was a big weekend for fights. We had a PFL card, first of the year, out in Dubai with a undefeated Bellator belt on the line. Dagestan versus Ireland. A bunch of those guys matching up from the different respective countries. Great card. We'll talk about that later in the show. We'll also talk to some of the fighters that we saw at Knucklemania 5, because that, of course, was this weekend as well. A huge card for the BKFC, setting records for them and for the Wells Fargo Center where they held it in Philadelphia. So we're going to break down that card right now. But later on, we're going to talk to some of the fighters involved. We're going to talk to Cody Russell, the middleweight who made his debut for the BKFC, Philly's own. He was on the prelim card, had a great performance there against Tucker. We'll talk to him about his fight. We will also talk to Patrick Brady, the heavyweight. We had him on last week as he was getting ready for the fight against, of course, Shark Attack Zach Kalmus. And it was really a brick attack. He just dominated the Shark. So we'll talk to him about that, see where he wants to go with the BKFC from here on. And then later on, we'll talk about the big draft that happened this past weekend. That's right, the GFL, the Global Fight League, because you're saying, wait, what draft? A new MMA league that is going to be coming around starting this year. The Global Fight League held its draft. A lot of names that you know. You might not know the name of the organization just yet, but you do know names of the fighters because there are many of them that you have seen for years and years in other organizations. So we'll get into all that on this edition of the Combat Sports Report. First, as we said, let's talk about the history-making card for BKFC down in Philadelphia this past weekend at the Wells Fargo Center. Over 17,600 attendance. You can see it there, packed to the gills. According to Dave Feldman, was saying that that was a new record for fight sports in Philadelphia, that they have had more fans there at that fight card than any card has had before for Philadelphia combat sports. So a great job there. You had legends throughout, not just on the fight card, not just fighters like Eddie Alvarez who headlined it, but of course, other sports as well. We saw Seth Joyner, the former Eagles linebacker. We saw Brian Westbrook, the former running back for the Eagles. We saw the Broad Street Bullies there, the former Philadelphia Flyers, who, of course, like to mix it up bare knuckle as well. They were even given honorary BKFC belts by Conor McGregor and Mario Lopez and Dave Feldman, if you go check that out on the BKFC social media. So lots of Philadelphia faithful, not just fight fans, but former athletes that love to go watch all the action there as well. I'm sure there are many, many more that they sprinkled in throughout the night that I didn't even catch, besides the ones I mentioned. So just it was packed. Lots of great people there and lots of great fights. We expect it to be an awesome card. Philly is a tough city. You get a lot of fighters coming from out there. You've had some greats, both in boxing, some great MMA fighters. You got even more that are in that situation now, which we'll talk to Pat Brady about because he trains with some of them. But lots of fights and fight history, of course, Rocky, which, of course, you talk about fights in Philly, everyone can bring that up. But let's talk about real fighters and real fights and what we saw there over the weekend. Of course, it was headlined by the welterweight battle between Eddie Alvarez, the Underground King, Philly's own, against Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens. Both these guys, longtime MMA fighters. Eddie Alvarez, of course, in Bellator, and then the UFC, former UFC champ. Stevens is a longtime UFC fighter, never got the championship, but had a long career there. And then both these guys, in the BKFC for a couple fights now. Stevens with some impressive wins lately, getting the chance to take out Eddie Alvarez after he was just bashing the Philadelphia faithful up and down from the time this fight was made. Just doing what he could at the press conference, saying they're a city of losers. Although now, of course, they're in the Super Bowl. Also saying that they are they have guys like Eddie Alvarez who are just going to lose all the time. And he's giving away front row seats to watch Eddie Alvarez get beat. Did not sit well with Alvarez, and I thought that would fuel him. And you know what? It definitely fueled him, but just not enough. The body did not hold up enough for the Underground King, unfortunately, as it was feeling out early. Round one, both these guys were throwing some good shots, but nobody landing a ton there. I thought that Alvarez was a little more aggressive coming forward. I thought he landed more than Stevens did early on, so I gave him the 10-9 first round. The second round, again, Alvarez was doing more coming forward. They were trading some big shots here or there. It was more of Alvarez volume versus Stevens power, depending on how you want to score that as a judge. Well, it seemed like the power is the one that won out because at some point, I believe in that second round, from what I saw, probably about 40 seconds in the big exchange they had, there was a big shot landed on Alvarez. And he didn't go down. He didn't even shake, didn't even have any issue with it, but his mouth was open. You can see, and it's not like his mouth wasn't open, heavy breathing. Sometimes you can't close it after you get a big shot like that, as we found out later on. Even though I thought Alvarez won the round, then in the corner still with the mouth wide open, the third round, again, Alvarez was coming forward, trying to, get in there against Stevens, and Stevens was landing some big shots. Actually got some knockdowns there against Alvarez. 2 knockdowns. Alvarez gets back up because he's Philly tough. He's a tough dude, not going to give up. You're going to have to take him out on his shield. Well, in the corner in the third round, after the third round, before the fourth, his corner is the one that said, you know what, no mas, no more. And we find out later on, you can go on social media and see Eddie Alvarez post that apparently during that second round, that jaw got broken. There's a big fracture there. You can see the scans he put up there to prove. It's like I tried to fight through it, but he landed the kill shot, and I was not able to continue. So great job for him. Stevens was taunting the crowd afterwards, of course, continuing with it all, continuing with the better guy mentality. Even was talking to McGregor and Dave Feldman saying, time to get paid. Give me a big fight. Well, Conor McGregor got in there afterwards and said he wants that fight. He said, book it to Feldman. Told Feldman before he went to the press conference, again, I want that fight. We'll see if that's going to happen. Obviously, Conor's still under contract with the UFC, even though he's a BKFC owner, and already had a boxing fight next against the Paul brothers. So I don't know if the BKFC and the UFC are going to be able to come together on that one. Of course, they're talking about trying to get some other fights going, but I don't know if that'll be one they'll do. Then the next fight coming up was, of course, the heavyweight title on the line between Big Mick Terrell and Big Ben Rothwell. The 2 heavyweights. Terrell was the champion over from Britain, having won it against Adams, defending it against the Juggernaut. Rothwell, this guy was undefeated in the BKFC, of course, a long-time MMA vet, a tough dude, a huge beast of a man. Had to cut 31 pounds a week of the fight, he told Ariel Helwani, in order to make weight, and was almost a 2-1 underdog. I was amazed at that. If you watched the fight last week, we said Rothwell by TKO in the third. If it went long, if we got to the fourth and the fifth, maybe Rothwell would get tired out, but I thought that he was just too big, too aggressive, too powerful for Terrell to outlast him, and that came true even faster than I thought. Round 1, Rothwell gets the first round KO. The guys were feeling out early. Rothwell actually I poked Terrell about 15 seconds in, so it was a little bit of a break. But then once they get back in there, Terrell tries to go after Rothwell and lands a good left, and then the right over the top there from Rothwell. Not the biggest punch, not the biggest windup, not a huge hook or anything like that, but the guy has so much power that you see Mick Terrell, the champ, fall like a tree, and his belt is now in the hands of Big Ben, who spoke afterwards about having that title, but you know what? Maybe that's not enough. Maybe the payday is what really is going to drive him as we get into 2025 here for the BKFC.
Ben, President David Feldman said that you'd make a great fit for the $25 million tournament. Are you open to that?
Yeah! Thank you for asking. Yes! I'm in. Good luck finding the opponents. But I'm in, because if this is bare knuckle, I'm going to win it. You're going to change my life, because I will win it. I don't care who you put in there. Get the biggest, best names. Bare knuckle is different than anything I've done in my life. I've done kickboxing, boxing, MMA. I've done it all. This is not like anything. You just don't do this. You just don't learn it. So let's put me in it, because I'm the best. I am the best at this.
After the fight, Rothwell talked in the ring there about how great the Philly crowd was, how this was one of the best crowds he's ever fought in, and how grateful he was for the BKFC. He'll be a lot more grateful if he gets $15 million to win that tournament, but I don't even think it's fair to put him in there. I don't even know a heavyweight maybe in the BKFC that can take him on, and just that weight class, you start throwing guys in from 175 and up, how are they going to take on Big Ben Rothwell? I don't know, but he is now the champion for the BKFC. Plenty of other great fights we'll hit on later on. Next up, though, let's talk to a man who had a great performance in his first fight for the BKFC, and that was Cody Russell, Philly's own, when we come back here on the Combat Sports Report, talking about everything that happened at Knucklemania 5 down in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into the Combat Sports Report on SportsGrid. Knucklemania 5 did not disappoint. Lived up to everything you would expect. Definitely going to be a contender for Card of the Year for the BKFC, maybe for one of their best ever, probably maybe even the best Knucklemania they have had yet. The Philly crowd didn't disappoint, and neither did the Philly fighters, as they were in there to make sure that they made their point and show how tough that city is. And one of those guys was Cody Russell, who showed up and made sure to show his opponent just what Philly tough is, with 5 knockdowns before his eventual finish. We bring him on now. Cody, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Great debut for you with the BKFC. What was it like for you to step into the Wells Fargo Center? 17,000 plus people screaming. I'm sure plenty there for you that chanting. What was the night like before you even got to the action in the fight there against Tucker?
It was a surreal experience, and I couldn't be more thankful for Dave and BKFC as a promotion. The whole thing was electric. It was a dream come true for especially all the Philly guys. And I couldn't give enough thanks to also my main training partner, Eddie Alvarez. It was a great person to look up to, and then being able to fight underneath of him up to that card. It couldn't have been better.
Yeah, unfortunately, a tough night for him with the break the way it happened. He was still pushing through, showing it was a great fight. But just that jaw did not hold up to some of those Steven shots, unfortunately, as people can see if they go check out the scans on his social media that he put up there, proving that, fighting another round or so with that, that shows how tough he is. But tell me about training with Eddie, how much that pushes you, and was that a thing that helped bring you to the BKFC, just seeing what he has done there, in his couple of fights with the organization?
It did. He brought me onto the scene for the Mike Perry camp. So I got to train with him leading up to that event as well. And then we just continue to stay in touch. But Eddie's one of those people. He is a champion inside and outside the ring. He leads the example. He knows how to push people and works well. Some people know how to push, but they don't know how the balance of being a good training partner. He's an example of a champion in all fields. So it's great to look up to him.
The transition for you too, because obviously, you can train for different styles of fighting, but nothing's like training for bare knuckle until you actually get in there. Actually hitting with bare knuckles, you can't really do that in training too much. Otherwise, you're risking getting hurt before you get in there for the fight and the payday. So, what was he able to teach you, and what were you expecting as you got in there? And what was different when you got in the squared circle for the first time?
He was able to tell me a little bit of the small details, preparations, what to do, what not to do. But as far as actually getting in there, I've been in a few fights leading up since I was a kid. So being in the squared circle was amazing. It was one of the best feelings, I would say, in all sports. I've done MMA, I've done boxing, but it's the most pure and passionate. Like, you have no gloves on. There's no running. It's a small squared circle. It's just you versus the other guy, and any one fight can change it.
You know, it's funny when you are around sports, you know, you hear the different press conferences and things athletes say. There are certain, you know, kind of isms that they all say, you know, there's certain things about how, you know, you got to play till the end of the game, things like that. It seems like with Philly fighters, especially with the BKFC, the thing that you hear over and over again is, well, I used to fight with no gloves for fun. Why not do it and get paid? You know, that this isn't new to you guys. You know, you've had those fist fights before, but that was just for pride and, you know, for street cred and things like that. So might as well get paid for it. But now you had this great fight against Tucker. Did you expect him to come out as aggressive as he did in the first round? The week, because he came out and tried to push it, and then, you know, you made him pay for it early on that first round.
I did. I knew he was going to come out a little aggressive. He's not as experienced, and normally that is the kind of the way that unexperienced people go. They want to push the pace. They're not as calm. They're not as poised in there. And I, at the bottom of my heart, I love the brawl. So the whole camp, my coach was trying to veer me away and just saying, hey, just outbox this dude, outclass him. You know, just show that you can put on a performance without having to engage in a brawl.
Well, you certainly did that. You were calm and collected. I mean, it felt like there were two different Tuckers in that fight. It felt like, you know, obviously at the beginning of that round, he came out aggressive. Even in the beginning of the second round, he came out aggressive as well, maybe out of a different situation, maybe more desperation and worrying about what was going on than, you know, the aggressive in the beginning. But then once you caught him with that first knockdown in the first round, all of a sudden he was not the one chasing. He was the one being chased. You know, he was the one being defensive. So you think that power that you showed early in that fight changed that for him and made him fight at a different style than he wanted to?
I did. I mean, he was talking quite a bit before the fight, but when you, like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and especially with a bare knuckle, that will change your attitude a little bit when you actually get a shot to the face with a bare knuckle.
For sure, and, you know, it seemed like he started to slow down after some of those shots in the second into the third round. Like, you know, the gas tank was empty maybe, or maybe it was just, you know, the other parts of the body weren't working as well after taking some of those bare knuckle punches like you just talked about. When did you feel like you were, you know, in control and this was your night, and it was just a matter of if not when? You know, you have 5 knockdowns. At some point, you got to be like, all right, this guy just isn't going to get by me. You know, or do you still have to have that not worry, but that, you know, respect, given that any one shot with bare knuckles can, you know, catch you in the right spot and put you out?
You always have to have the respect, but if you, at the end of the first round, we had a little verbal back and forth, and I basically just told him, you're out of your league on this one. And I told him that before the fight, but I just wanted to remind him that he's not in the same league as me.
Well, you showed that. A great performance by you. You get the victory there in the third round. Now, you know, you've done boxing, you've done MMA, now you've done bare knuckle boxing. Is this where you feel the most comfortable? This is where you feel like, you know, to stay, or are you still going to bounce back and forth to different disciplines depending on what opportunities arise, and, you know, how soon do you want to get back in there with the BKFC?
This was definitely the most fun. So if we can make it work, I would like to stick with BKFC, and I think I have a bright future in this division.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you back in there, hopefully with the BKFC. And I saw on the site that they got another Philly card coming up in a couple months, so hopefully we get you back on there, or maybe even sooner. Cody Russell, great debut performance in the BKFC against Logan Tucker. Thanks so much for the time. We appreciate you coming on with us and looking forward to seeing what is next for you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure having you.
Just a dominating performance in a debut. That is what Cody Russell gave us early in the card. Really helped to set the tone for what we saw throughout the rest of that card at Knucklemania 5. When we come back, we'll wrap up the card and see the last few things that we have on our mind from what happened there down in Philly.
going to get rid of all the badness, if you will, over the past few decades for the Raiders and set yourself up for the future. It's a horrible job to take if you expect to win, but it's not a bad paying gig, so go ahead and take it.
With an owner in Mark Davis who has continued to make bad decision after bad decision. Does Pete Carroll leave a culture behind that Joe Brady in 2 to 3 years takes over?
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
He did nothing for 5 weeks. So he's becoming his brother. So I don't want to hear about how great TJ Watt is with his 0 playoff wins. And he's the first guy to admit it. He comes right out and says, I've never won a playoff game. I don't matter. All right, at least we all know who the best player on the team is. It's George Pickens. If you don't believe that, well, then screw you, too.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
We'll see if they get McCain back. Kelly Oubre, Yabusele's been good. Caleb Martin's a defensive specialist. Andre Drummond can still give you, almost a double-double at any point. I can't go south on this team. And now you're giving it to me at 2-1 to make the playoffs? To be in the Final 8? Folks, give me the Philadelphia 76ers to make the playoffs at plus 210.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. Great to get to meet Cody Russell and talk to him about that great debut he had for the BKFC at Knucklemania 5. But there's plenty more fights we have to hit on. This card was stacked. So many finishes from top to bottom. I think 10 of the 12 fights did not make it all the way to the end. The one that was, actually decided by the disqualification instead of knockout. There were 10 knockouts, 1 DQ, 1 that went to the judges' scorecards, and that one was one of the feature fights there, the flyweight battle between the women, Taylor Killer Bee Starling and Rowdy Beck Rawlings. This one was all Rawlings. Starling's tough. She didn't quit. She kept coming forward. But as you see there, 1 minute in, as she's backing up too, not even coming forward, Beck Rawlings catches Killer Bee, drops to the mat, and it seemed like the rest of the fight, there were times that she was tentative to come forward. She wasn't pushing the action. She was trying to fight her off. She was still trying to engage because you're not going to keep Taylor Starling down, but that was a tough fight where Beck Rawlings was using great movement to avoid it, landing the big power shots that backed her up at times. I mean, there was even the replays they were showing at one point after one of the rounds that poor Taylor Starling has had the memes, of course, about when she got pummeled pretty good there by the Misfit. Well, after round 2, they kept showing her getting hit and the movement of the face, and that's probably going to be memes on the internet now too. So a valiant performance by Taylor Starling, but Beck Rawlings is proving to be too much for her and putting on a great performance. Rawlings, again, talked about how great the Philly crowd was, like a lot of these fighters did afterwards, even the ones that aren't from there. Said she wants to keep fighting the BKFC, that they need to book her more. She's tired of sitting around and waiting for fights. Keep booking her more. And then on social media also, if you go see Kat Zingano had a great video out there as well, where she showed the two of them getting stitched up together in the back, kind of holding hands, talking as they're both getting dealt with by the doctors from all the cuts and bruises that they gave each other in that fight. But a great performance by Beck Rawlings, who then went out and enjoyed Philadelphia on Sunday. I saw her, I think, tailgating at the Eagles NFC Championship game. So she was taking in Philly fully, enjoying every moment of it. A great performance by her. Also, the heavyweight fight, Pat the Brick Brady, we'll talk to him coming up next, but he had a battle against Zach the Shark Attack Calamus. Calamus coming in there on a 4-fight win streak, 4 finishes. Brady had just the 1 fight in the BKFC. We thought this might be a tough fight, or at least one that made Brady really work for it, but it really wasn't. We thought Calamus might win late in the round and tire Brady out after taking some big shots because we know the chin that Calamus has, but just about 15 seconds in, gets dropped by Brady after he comes forward strongly. Nails a big shot. Calamus gets back up because he's a tough guy, but as you see there, just taking shot after shot after shot for the rest of the fight until about 53 seconds left in the round. The ref jumps in. Just over a minute of the fight of Brady just pummeling Calamus. The ref said, that's enough. He's not fighting back. He's not protecting himself. Can't see anymore. And Pat the Brick Brady has a great performance there at heavyweight. We'll see what he thought about it himself. I know I read the article on the BKFC sat an app there that he kind of was disappointed. He wanted more back from Zach because, there's people in Philly that are thinking that he just got some tomato can to punch on, in front of the hometown faithful. But that's not the case if they really knew that he just dominated who has been a very tough fighter in the heavyweight division for the BKFC. We'll see what's next for Pat Brady. He wants some big fights. We'll see if there's anybody that he has in mind when we talk to him next on the show. Also on the fight card, you had a great fight. Garbarino, first round TKO over Spencer, where he just stalked Spencer from the beginning. Lots of head moving from him. The boxer just knowing how to get around. Didn't really get any shots landed on him. And then 11 seconds left in the fight. Big overhand right that dropped Spencer. He looked shook up after he got dropped. Didn't even try to get back up. Like he was awake. It wasn't unconscious like some of these that we saw, but just want to know more of it. Garbarino gets the win and then gets on a knee. He didn't get dropped to a knee by a punch, but gets on a knee, proposes to his girlfriend in the ring. Luckily, she said yes, and congratulations to him on the win and now on his engagement. Then you had Tomlinson Jr. there going against Pat Sullivan. Sullivan, of course, a former hockey enforcer. People were hyped for him to be fighting there in Philadelphia in his hometown, but it did not work out well for him. This one is all over the internet. 37 seconds in, Tomlinson with such a big shot there that Sullivan falls like a tree into the ropes. His head whipped around a couple times. Since you're in Philly, one of the longtime actors from Philadelphia with a show about coming from West Philly, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. For those of us who remember the original, who are old enough from that, when you see the head whopping around here, that reminds me of the end of that, the intro of that show where Will Smith just moving the head around and around. That's what Sullivan looked like after getting dropped there by Tomlinson. And then, of course, another Philly faithful, Travis Thompson, the Animal, getting the KO over Zach Pinnell in round 2. Thompson got dropped pretty early in that fight, but he is a beast. He comes forward, he continues to push, and he gets the win in front of his home fans with a nice knockout there. As you see, Pinnell just out on the feet before he finally goes down and comes flopping forward. A lot of awesome fights on that card, a lot of great performances by Philly fighters in front of the Philly faithful. Looking forward to seeing them back there again soon, but also looking forward to seeing a lot of the fights that are coming up next for the BKFC in the coming months. Just a great job by them for Knucklemania 5.
This guy Ovechkin, how he was injured and missed all that time, and the fact that he's still on pace to pass Gretzky.
I think everybody's rooting for Ovechkin at this point in time, and I think he'll do it as well. So it's a feat that no one ever thought Scotty would be broken. It's going to be broken, and it's probably going to be broken because he's not going to stop shooting.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We all know MVPs don't win the Super Bowl. It's not about MVPs, man. The only MVP, fine. Win the MVP of the Super Bowl. Nobody cares about the MVP of the regular season besides people that bet on it, the actual player themselves, and their agent that's getting a cut of the bonus money. Other than that, who cares? What do you care who wins the MVP? Like I said, unless you bet on it. Right? If you bet on it, fine. Then I guess you care.
Sports Rage tonight, only on SportsGrid.
They have a lot of hopes, and they thought last year they were turning the corner. Even early this year, they start turning the corner, and then you lose 13 games in a row.
Edmonton chipped away, got a late goal, won the game 4-3. I felt like they dominated the third period. They moved the puck on that power play. It was an exceptional hockey game. It went over the total.
Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. Knucklemania 5 was awesome. We can't stop talking about it, but let's talk to one of the guys who was involved with, who had one of the best performances on that main card. We talked to him last week, but, I mean, the fight was so good, we had to bring him back. Pat the Brick Brady. Pat, thanks so much for joining us here on SportsGrid again. I mean, it looks like you're getting ready for a fight, not like you just got out of one. Great performance for you against Zach there. An incredible fight for you, I'm sure. It was a night to remember, not just for the victory, but doing it in front of everybody in the Wells Fargo. Let's talk about it right out of the gates. You know, what was that the plan, to come aggressive right out of the way? Because, you know, sometimes it's a feeling out process. Of course, less with the BKFC a lot of times, given that you guys only have 2 minutes. But, I mean, it's about 3 to 4 seconds of you guys staring at each other, and then you just mauled them.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Brian, I was really surprised he backed up right away. The plan was always to get him to back up. And that's pretty much the plan with anybody who I'm fighting in there. And he backed up right out of the gate. So I'm like, oh, all right, well, if you're backing up, I'm going to come forward, which is always my plan. So I was really surprised that he backed up. And, you know, I just, look, we were working entries, my team and I, Chris Dawkins, Kyle Dawkins, and John Mercurio, Dawkins brothers, obviously most notable for fighting in the UFC. We were working entries, and we had specific setup entries that we knew were going to work on Zach based on how he responded to certain strikes in previous films that we had watched on him. So I kind of knew like his hand placement and what he was going to do for certain, you know, like I said, for certain strikes. So we had things set up and in place that we had repped thousands of times, and everything kind of went exactly according to plan, other than I was kind of hoping for more of a fight. Look, I don't know, man. I want a little more of a fight. And it was like you said, there was a lot of people there, 17,000 people. And if anyone didn't know Zach, or, you know, the success that he had in bare knuckle with being on a 4-fight win streak, if anyone didn't know any better, it looks like I just walked in there and mauled a guy who shouldn't have been in there. You know what I mean? But, you know, Zach's an extinguished bare knuckle fighter. Like he's won some fights, man, and he was on a tear. And it was a little easier than I had thought. It's hard to say. I wish it were, you know what I mean? But I'm happy with the outcome. There's that little bit of me that says, like, there's shit talkers, you know, the people who talk shit, and, you know, they say things like, oh, you know, you went in there and beat up a dude who was out of shape. And it was like, no, I didn't. I went in there and performed at an elite level against an accomplished bare knuckle fighter on a 4-fight win streak. That's what I did. It's not like I just went in there and just beat up Kevin off the streets.
That is true. You know, Zach was on a 4-fight win streak. I mean, we were talking to him before the fight about, I mean, do you get in the top 5 rankings if you get this win? 5 in a row. He had 4 finishes, so it was definitely not a pushover, not some bum that they just picked to make you look good. But you did look good. We saw the video there at the end. You know, just the 1-2-1-2s. That's just like the speed rounds at the end of a workout on the bag. That, you know, just trying to get that extra cardio. Yeah. And it's not even like, oh, I have to look for my openings. It just went everything your way. Despite Zach being the tough guy that he usually is. Did you know after the first knockdown, the early knockdown that you had about 15 seconds in, that it was going to be your night, or did you still have to, of course, give respect because of how tough and powerful he is? But did you feel like you were in control at that point already?
No. I knew that, like, Zach could take a beating, right? I knew that Zach could take a beating, so I knew one knockdown wasn't going to do it. So after I knocked him down, you know, again, I just went back to my training and I just went to a different entry, right? Like, my first entry was a 2-3, and then that second entry that I went into, when my first entry was a 3-2, my second entry was a 1-2 to body, 3 up top. Right, which, like, it sounds like you're just saying numbers, 1, 2, 3, right? But, like, there's specific head placement, right? There's foot placement. There's
range, where you are with your range. There's a lot that goes into an entry. It's not just like throw the punch, right? Throw a 2, throw a 3. It was like every single detail as to that entry was repped, and where my feet are, where my head is, where my hand placement's going to be, where my range is. What am I doing on a follow-up? My recoil, my hand placement, am I bringing it back to my face? Am I bringing it back to my chest? Where am I going? Everything was really specific. And, you know, it worked, right? And after the knockdown, I closed the distance again and I re-entered. I knew he was going to still throw back, right? So you could tell, like, there was a couple moments where I was expecting to return, right? And I stepped back, and there was a couple where we were training getting back in, right? Like, we actually trained, like, listen, get your hands on the ropes and get chest to chest with him, because he's just going to throw wild, right? And if you're in that tight, he can't land anything. And then step back out and then get back to striking. We also worked striking from an angle, so getting off to the right of him and throwing that uppercut. Like, everything you threw, I was repping, I was working, my partners were holding mitts, and I was training and sparring. So it's not like what you're looking at is just a wild man throwing punches. Like, those were accurate, calculated strikes that I'd been training specifically for. So I thought the ref probably could have stopped it a little bit sooner. You can hear me in the one clip yell at the ref, "Stop it!" Like, because I could have done that. And I could throw punches like that for another 3 minutes. Like, I have videos of me, like, literally training that sequence over and over and over again. I could do that for, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. So I'm happy with the result. I wish it would have been a little bit more of a war, but that's just for the naysayers, not necessarily because I want to get beat up, but just for the people who talk shit and say that, you beat up a bum. But I guess I really shouldn't care what people think. I got my hand raised in front of 17,000 people, so.
Listen, you're living around Philly. There's always going to be someone who's talking that smack, thinking they're tougher than
Always,
you.
man.
You showed how
Always.
badass you are, and we're looking forward to the next fight. I mean, it was quick work for you. I saw the interview you did with the BKFC that's on the app and the website. People want to check it out. Where you said, you're on the big names now. You show what you can do against a guy who is a top level guy. Let's get some big names in there. Anybody on the hit list, and how quickly do you want to get back in there? Because obviously it was an easy night for you. All that training, you probably didn't feel like you really even burned too many calories. So, when's the target?
Yeah.
I know there's a Philly card coming up. Card coming up in a couple months. There is that the goal there? And what are the guys that you want to get on your hit list in the last minute we have with you?
No, I want bigger fights. They signed this guy called the Huntsman. I forget where he's from, but they call him the Huntsman. I think he's like sponsored by Proper. I think he's one of Connor's boys. So I actually, Connor started following me on Instagram. So I messaged Connor and told him I wanted to fight the Huntsman. And he actually responded and said that would be a good fight. And, so maybe I can fight him in Dubai. Yeah, maybe I can fight him in Dubai. That would be a fun fight.
That'd be great. Or, maybe we get you involved in this tournament that Dave's put out there, this $25 million tournament. We already know Big Ben's interested in it. Maybe we get the Brick in there as well. Looking forward to it, Pat. Great for second fight for the BKFC. Must have been an amazing night to do that in front of your hometown fans in Philly. Thanks so much for joining us. And we're looking forward to seeing what's next for you in the BKFC.
Thanks.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You want me to solve all this tush-push and fourth down malarkey that goes on with the officials? Here's a crazy idea. Get rid of the worst rule in the NFL, and that is forward progress. How about this? Where I knock your ass on the ground is where the ball goes, period. Let's end this whole conversation. Like, if I drop you back 4 yards, then you lost 4 yards. If we get rid of forward progress, this tush-push and everything else is taken care of. Where I put your tail on the ground is where the ball goes, end of conversation. It's the dumbest rule and the most arbitrary rule. The only thing that is a worse call in the NFL than forward progress is the punt that goes out of bounds when you watch the official walk down the sideline having absolutely no clue where that ball crossed over. All I can think of is that Price is Right game go do-de-do-de-do, do-de-do-de-do, as he's walking down the sideline, arbitrarily trying to figure out where the ball crossed over because he's got no clue.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. Now, Knucklemania 5 was awesome, but that was not the only card in action in combat sports last weekend. There was also the first one of the new year for the PFL. The PFL Road to Dubai Champions Series, and we had a great card. Dagestan versus Russia versus Ireland there with, of course, Nurmagomedov putting his undefeated record up against Hughes. He had a bunch of different Dagestani versus Ireland fighters on the card. A lot of great action that they had on Max over the weekend. It was an early fight card. If you missed it, make sure you go check it, of course, because it was over in Dubai, so a lot earlier than most of us are used to fights here in the U.S. Standard Time. But, of course, if you watch it, headlined by a great battle. Let's get right into it, give you a recap of what we saw that main event. First of all, Usman Nurmagomedov versus Paul Hughes. Now, of course, we're still not sure. Usman walked out with the belt. It was still the Bellator belt, though, which is supposed to be gone, so I don't know if that is going to translate into him being the PFL champion. But, you had guys in Bellator shirts, you had guys in PFL shirts, but you had a packed arena out there in Dubai. Hughes with the 13-1 record coming in there, talking a lot of smack, 2-0 in the PFL and Bellator. Nurmagomedov was 18-0 with one no contest, was a champ, was undefeated in his time in Bellator. That's why he had that lightweight title, and he continues to be undefeated as he gets the win by decision in a back and forth fight. We said that we thought Nurmagomedov was going to get this. We said either by sub or decision. He got it by decision in the end. It was early on. Nurmagomedov was coming up and was aggressive. Both guys were throwing leg kicks and feints, kind of feeling each other out. But Nurmagomedov was landing more of the kicks. He was even throwing the body, trying to the head. Hughes eventually landed a nice shot, late in the round, but didn't do anything to Usman. He just shook it off. That was his round. In my opinion, it was the same on all three judges' scorecards. Round two, Hughes was a little more aggressive, came forward with a good jab early. He knocked him down with a kick, but avoided the takedown. That was a theme for a lot of the fight, was that Hughes did a good job avoiding takedowns, just like he did against A.J. McKee. And it would make this fight, pretty close, because if he got taken down every time, it would have been a situation where Usman would have dominated him, but only got less than half his knockdowns, 4-9 overall. I thought that it was a good round for Hughes in that second round. I gave it to him on that one. Even at that point, two of the judges gave it to Usman, though. Round three, both guys were landing some shots. Again, back and forth. Usman was going for a bunch of single-leg takedowns. Hughes was getting out of them. But there were times where Usman landed some good elbows coming out of the clinch. I thought he got that round, but there was a point deduction for crotch shocks. We had a couple of those by both guys. So, still all even on my card. In the fourth round and the fifth round, I think this is where Usman took it. He ends up getting the decision 48-46. That's how I scored it on my card as well, because the end of the fourth round, he gets a nice takedown and ends up holding the position on top for the end of the round, despite Hughes having some good moments. In the fifth round, they're both clashing, they're both circling, again, with some takedowns. And I think those takedowns were the ones that were the biggest difference for Usman, because Hughes had his moments. There was one point in the third, after he landed a crotch shot on Nurmagomedov, where he's got blood coming down his face and just playing it up to the crowd, just looking kind of like a horror movie. And he's loving it, working the crowd as they're waiting for Usman to recover, and they get back into things. He was playing the crowd. He loved it. He had some good shots. He had some good moments. But in the end, as I said, I think it was the takedowns of Usman and Nurmagomedov, despite Hughes doing a good job avoiding all of them, that end up getting it for the champion. He gets the decision victory. Retained his title, talked about how much respect he had for Hughes, talked about how he was hurting after that fight, and that he was pushed way harder than he thought he would be pushed. Hughes gave his respect as well. We saw both these guys actually on social media afterwards talking. You saw them in the cage. You also saw them on the PFL social media, where they're showing them in the locker room, talking back and forth, having a lot of respect. Khabib, Usman's cousin and trainer, actually invited Hughes and his team to come to Dagestan to kind of settle the beef. And Hughes seems all good for it, except first he wants a rematch, and he wants it in Dublin. We'll see if they hold it there. We'll see, or I'm sorry, Belfast, not Dublin. He wants it in Belfast. We'll see if the PFL is able to make that happen, if they give it right to him, or if they, have a couple fights between these guys and other fighters before they eventually rematch. But he thinks that he'll be back there one time trying for that belt once more and trying to give Nurmagomedov that loss once again. The co-main event, you had Vadim Nemkov, the former Bellator light heavyweight champ, going against Tim Johnson, the heavyweight, because, of course, Nemkov moving up to heavyweight now in the PFL. This was his second fight there. Johnson was a late replacement after Bellator lost the Corey Anderson fight and his previous opponent before that as well. So, Nemkov was going to be the smaller guy, was outweighed by about 20 pounds, but showed why he is still so dangerous. Just the way he was able to avoid big shots, the way he was able to still get takedowns against Johnson. It was a one-round fight where it was just Nemkov taking Johnson down, Johnson getting up. Nemkov tripping, taking Johnson down, Johnson getting back up. Over and over again until about, just over 2.5 minutes, where he gets him down for the last time, does Nemkov, takes his back, and just after 3 minutes into the fight, gets the rear naked choke and ends it by submission by getting the tap from Johnson. So Nemkov showing once again that he's going to be a 4-set heavyweight, even if he's going to be undersized in certain regards to some of these guys like Johnson, who are going to be tipping the scales at just that heavyweight limit, while he is going to be about 20 pounds lighter. But we've seen before in MMA, if you're athletic, if you're skilled, if you're fast, like an Andrei Arlovsky, in that great shape, like, his mentor, Fedor, you don't have to be 265 to be good at heavyweight. You just have to be better than the other guy, and he showed that he was over Tim Johnson. You also had a good featherweight battle between Ahmed Magomedov versus Nathan Kelly, another Dagestan versus Irish battle there. And this one was Magomedov. Even though he was coming off a 2-year, ring rust, he gets the win in the second round by rear naked choke, which it didn't seem like it was going to be that way early on. I mean, in the beginning of that fight, Kelly came forward over early. Kelly gave calf kicks, and then he stunned him with a good shot that backed Magomedov off and, was on top, was controlling that fight until all of a sudden, halfway through that round, Magomedov switches it up. He's the one on top. He's the one throwing shots. And then again in the second round, he comes forward. He takes Kelly back down to the mat. Shows that there is no such thing as ring rust when you train with that team, as the commentators were saying, Connor. And, of course, our guy Dan Hardy, they were talking about when you train with, the Nurmagomedovs, Makachev, and all those guys, there's no ring rust. And he showed that 2 years off is nothing for him. Gets the rear naked choke to get his first win back in competition. And then Ibragimov versus Manakona, that was a dominating fight for Ibragimov, the Dagestani, just tossing his opponent around, even though he was a smaller fighter. Gets the decision victory. You see him just throwing boxes, kind of taunting his opponent, just dominating him on the ground. Great performance by the Dagestani fighters. And the road to Dubai card for PFL. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next from this organization.
This guy Ovechkin, how he was injured and missed all that time, and the fact that he's still on pace to pass Gretzky.
I think everybody's rooting for Ovechkin. at this point in time. And I think he'll do it as well. So it's a feat that no one ever thought Scotty would be broken. It's going to be broken, and it's probably going to be broken because, Scotty, he's not going to stop shooting.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We all know MVPs don't win the Super Bowl. It's not about MVPs, man. The only MVP, fine. Win the MVP in the Super Bowl. Nobody cares about the MVP in the regular season besides people that bet on it, the actual player themselves, and their agent that's getting a cut of the bonus money. Other than that, who cares? What do you care who wins the MVP? Like I said, unless you bet on it. Right? If you bet on it, fine. Then I guess you care.
Sports Rage tonight, only on SportsGrid.
They have a lot of hopes, and they thought last year they were turning the corner. Even early this year, they start turning the corner, and then you lose 13 games in a row.
Edmonton chipped away, got a late goal, won the game 4-3. I felt like they dominated the third period. They moved the puck on that power play. It was an exceptional hockey game. It went over the total.
Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back as we wrap up another episode of the Combat Sports Report here on SportsGrid. Appreciate everybody tuning in and finding out what was going on in the world of the combat sports. We had some great cards, as we said, PFL Champion Series, Road to Dubai. We had the Knucklemania 5. Thanks so much to our guests from that card. Of course, the heavyweight Pat the Brick Brady from the BKFC and BKFC middleweight Cody Russell, both of them having some great, impressive wins on that card, stacked with impressive performances. Make sure you check it out if you have not already, and make sure you go watch PFL Road to Dubai, the Champion Series, the Dagestan versus Ireland. It didn't disappoint. There were some great fights, and that fight at the top, it's very close. If you judges scored it slightly different ways, it could have gone the way of Hughes, but I thought Nurmagomedov did a great job, and Hughes did a great job as well, pushing him much more than people probably thought he would have. So awesome for both those fight cards. And one league that we're looking forward to getting started is going to be a new one. Sometimes we have new leagues pop up here and there that come and go, as we saw Bellator close up shop now. But this year, starting in 2025, there will be the Global Fight League. Now, this is a situation where it's going to be a little different. This is a fight league that is going to have teams. We've kind of seen that before. There was like the Pro MMA League where you had some kind of team concept. We're seeing that again come back into fruition here with the Global Fight League that's going to be starting in April. Just around the same time that we're going to see these PFL tournaments start up. You have a regular season where the teams, fight against each other. You got 6 different cities that have teams in this regard. Then there's going to be semifinals and a finals to decide who is the GFL champion. Now, this is going to be different than, of course, regular other organizations where there's going to be much more revenue sharing for the fighters. They're going to be involved in ownership and things like that. So there are a lot of people involved and a lot of fighters. They're going to be 50% revenue share. There's going to be retirement fund and insurance funds for the fighters. So a different concept than we've seen before for a lot of these MMA fighters, some of them that they have been begging for a long time when they compare, the different sports between the big four and the combat sports and the other things that we see. So, this is something that I'm sure a lot of fighters are interested in. We've seen that. And as far as every fight going in the regular season, you have the different divisions, but you get 4 points for a finish win, 3 points for a decision win, 2 points for a draw, 1 point for a decision loss, and no points if your fighter is finished in their fight. So you got teams, they get together, and you each have fights, and depending on how the fights go and the matchups go, that determines how many points you have, and eventually we will get to playoffs with these teams between these fighters. But you want to talk about some of the names that you know from this organization? Well, I'll tell you. Some big names that you have known from the past in the UFC, Strikeforce, Bellator, all these different organizations, the PFL. Let's talk about London team. that has guys like Alexander Gustafsson and Ilir Latifi, Gegard Mousasi, Benson Henderson, Julia Budd. Plenty of great fighters there who have had long careers in the UFC and other organizations. Then you look at Dubai, where teams were drafted, and you have fighters like Luke Rockhold, Derek Brunson, Tyrone Woodley, who was the first one drafted in this draft, in the snake draft that they had of all these fighters. You also have Arlene Blenko and some others on that roster as well. What are the highlights of the Miami roster? Well, you got Junior Dos Santos fighting there, Thiago Santos. You have Gleison Tebow. You have Hector Lombard, Yoel Romero, Paige Van Zandt. So plenty of names. Kat Zingano, who we just mentioned a couple minutes ago, talking about that fight in the BKFC and the video she put up of Beck Rawlings and Taylor Starling after the fight. So she's going to be involved in the Miami fight team for GFL. San Paulo has a team as well with Fabricio Verdum, Mauricio Hua. You have some other ones, Douglas Lima. There are some other fighters on Sunsao, Henan Barao. So plenty of names that you have seen in the UFC from that roster as well. And to finish it off, the New York roster, Alan Belcher, the former BKFC heavyweight champion, Ovid St. Preux from the former UFC, Chris Weidman, the former UFC champion, who just retired from there, but now is going to be fighting in this apparently. Jimmy Rivera, who we've seen in the BKFC and the UFC. Holly Holm, the former UFC champ. So plenty of names that you know from the world of combat sports and MMA and the BKFC. Lots of crossover overall between this organization and other organizations. So the Global Fight League, very interested to see how that develops, see where we'll be able to watch this, how these fights are going to happen, how the matchup's going to be determined from team versus team. All these are going to be happening from April 2025 on, where we finally get some of what these fighters have been asking for. When we look at the lawsuits against the UFC and against other organizations, they want a bigger piece of the pie. Well, they're getting a 50-50 split. They wanted to have money after they're done fighting because, a lot of fighters, they only get paid when you're fighting. After that, good luck. Well, they're going to have retirement funds. They're going to have insurance. So much of what the fighters have been asking for is involved in this league, and hopefully it works out for the best for them. But plenty of fighters that you know and that you've loved seeing fight over the years. We're looking forward to seeing what is next for the GFL. We'll see you on Combat Sports Report next week, when we'll look at more of what's going on in the world of combat sports.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You want me to solve all this tush-push and fourth down malarkey that goes on with the officials? Here's a crazy idea. Get rid of the worst rule in the NFL, and that is forward progress. How about this? Where I knock your ass in the ground is where the ball goes, period. Let's end this whole conversation. Like, if I drop you back 4 yards, then you lost 4 yards. If we get rid of forward progress, this tush-push and everything else is taken care of. Where I put your tail on the ground is where the ball goes, end of conversation. It's the dumbest rule and the most arbitrary rule. The only thing that is a worse call in the NFL than forward progress is the punt that goes out of bounds when you watch the official walk down the sideline having absolutely no clue where that ball crossed over. All I can think of is that Price is Right game go do-de-do-de-do, do-de-do-de-do, as he's walking down the sideline, arbitrarily trying to figure out where the ball crossed over because he's got no clue.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.